There are some months that stain the calendar red. January 2026 was one of those months. While most people were still shaking off the holidays, still writing the wrong year on their checks, something dark was moving through America, through Australia, across the cold waters of the Mediterranean. 5 separate stories. 5 pockets of darkness that opened up like wounds in the fabric of ordinary life. And in each one, there's something that should keep anyone awake at night. Something that whispers, this could happen anywhere. To anyone. What follows isn't fiction. It's not some campfire story designed to give a comfortable scare before returning to a safe, warm bed. These are real events, real people, real blood on real pavement. And for those ready to peer into these 5 dark corners of the world, hit that subscribe button right now, because this journey goes deep into places most true crime channels won't dare to venture. These aren't just stories. These are the shadows that haunt our world. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The nurse who tried to help Minneapolis, Minnesota, January 24th, 2026. A cold January morning in Minneapolis. The kind of morning where breath hangs in the air like a ghost. 9:05 a.m. on Nicollet Avenue in the Whittier neighborhood. People heading to work. Coffee cups warming cold hands. Just another Friday. And then the hunters arrived. Federal agents, ICE, Border Patrol, men with badges and guns, conducting what they'd later call a routine immigration enforcement operation. But there was nothing routine about what happened next. Alex Jeffrey Pretti was 37 years old, an intensive care nurse at a VA hospital. The kind of person who spent his days keeping other people alive, who understood better than most how fragile the line is between breathing and not breathing. He was a lawful gun owner, his right, his choice, his Second Amendment freedom. He had no criminal record, not even a speeding ticket. That morning, Pretti saw something that made him stop. A woman, federal agents shoving her, rough hands, rough voices, and Alex, good, decent Alex. He did what nurses do. He tried to help. There are videos, multiple videos, because everyone has a camera in 2026, and everyone documents everything. And sometimes that's a blessing, and sometimes it's a curse. In those videos, Alex Pretti can be seen on the ground, pinned, federal agents surrounding him like wolves around something wounded. And then gunshots, multiple shots, the kind of sound that doesn't just echo off buildings. It echoes through families, through communities, through the space where trust used to live. The witnesses say Alex never brandished his weapon, never pulled it, never threatened anyone. His attorneys say the same thing. Even the videos, grainy, shaky, filmed by hands that were probably trembling, show a man who was trying to de-escalate, trying to help, trying to do the human thing. But federal agents tell a different story. They always do. And here's what happened next. After the shooting, when local police tried to investigate, when they tried to do their job, their duty, their obligation to the truth, federal agents blocked them from the scene. Blocked them, as if the truth was something that needed to be cordoned off, protected, hidden. A federal judge had to issue a temporary restraining order just to keep the evidence from vanishing like morning frost. On January 25th and 26th, protests erupted across Minneapolis. People in the streets demanding answers, demanding justice, demanding that someone, anyone, explain why a nurse who tried to help was now dead on a cold January morning. The case continues to unfold. Federal investigation, state investigation, everyone pointing fingers, everyone telling their version of the truth. But Alex Jeffrey Pretti is still dead, and that's the only truth that really matters. If this story resonates, if it makes anyone feel something, hit that like button. Share this video. Because stories like Alex's don't get told unless people make sure they're heard, and the next story is even darker, Chapter 2. The spree across state lines, Florida and Georgia, January 16th to 21st, 2026. Flay Rollins, 54 years old. Not much was known about him before mid-January 2026, when he became the kind of name that gets whispered in quiet rooms, the kind of name that parents use to remind their children that monsters are real, and they don't always look like monsters. 3 victims, 3 separate locations, Florida and Georgia. 24 to 48 hours of blood and bullets, and brutality. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't heat-of-the-moment rage or a deal gone wrong. This was methodical, deliberate, hunting. The first victim was a woman found at Camp Richardson Recreation and Retreat Center in Leon County, Florida. Shot to death. Her name hasn't been released to the public, but somewhere, someone is grieving her. Someone is waking up every morning and remembering that she's gone. The second victim was discovered in the Apalachicola National Forest. She was pregnant. Not 1 death, 2. A mother and the child she was carrying. Life snuffed out before it even had a chance to draw its first breath. And then there was a third victim. Details remain scarce. Rollins led authorities to the body himself, like he was proud of it, like he wanted someone to see his work. Flay Rollins was arrested on an outstanding warrant from Georgia, completely unrelated to the murders. Just dumb luck. Or maybe not luck at all, maybe the universe has a way of catching up with people like him. While in custody, he confessed, just opened his mouth and let the darkness spill out. 1 murder. Then he led them to another, and another. First-degree murder charges, multiple counts, firearm possession as a convicted felon. And the question everyone's asking, the question that keeps investigators awake at night, is why? Why these women? Were they connected? Did they know each other? Did they know him? Or were they just unlucky enough to cross paths with a man who decided that January 2026 was the month he'd stop pretending to be human? The investigation continues. Ballistics, crime scene analysis, trying to piece together the timeline, trying to understand the mind of a man who can take 3 lives in 2 days and apparently sleep soundly, if he sleeps at all. For those watching, make sure to subscribe to this channel for cases like this every single week. Cases that crawl under the skin and stay there. And for those who want to support this work, to help keep telling these stories, check out the links in the description. Now, the journey goes international. Chapter 3. Laughter in Lake Cargelligo, New South Wales, Australia, January 22nd, 2026, Lake Cargelligo. The kind of small rural town where everyone knows everyone, where doors stay unlocked and neighbors look out for each other, and life moves at a pace that city folks have forgotten exists. Until 4:30 in the afternoon on January 22nd, 2026. That's when the shooting started. Sophie Quinn was 25 years old, 7 months pregnant. Her whole life ahead of her. Not just her life, but her baby's life. All those moments that would never happen now. First breath, first word, first day of school. Gone, shot dead. Her aunt, Nerida Quinn, 50 years old, dead. John Harris, 32 years old, dead. And Caleb McQueen, 19 years old. He survived, but survival isn't the same as living. Not when there are multiple gunshot wounds and the memory of a man laughing while he tried to kill. Laughing. The shooter was laughing. While he fired bullets into human beings. While he ended lives and destroyed families and turned a quiet afternoon in a quiet town into something out of a nightmare. He was laughing. The suspect has been locally identified as Julian Ingram, 37 years old. As of the last reports, he remains at large, still out there somewhere. A massive police manhunt underway, helicopters and search parties, and every available officer scouring the countryside. But he's a ghost, or maybe not a ghost. Maybe just a man who knows how to hide, who knows the land, who's comfortable in the darkness because he's been living in it for a while now. The motive appears to be domestic violence, a personal connection. Someone who knew these people, who'd been part of their lives, who'd sat across from them at dinner tables and then decided one day to end them. But here's the question that haunts this case. If the motive was personal, if this was about Sophie or Nerida or John specifically, why was he laughing? What kind of person finds joy in that moment? What crosses over inside a human being that lets them laugh while they squeeze a trigger? There's no answer. Nobody has one. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. For those still watching, thank you. These stories aren't easy to tell and they're not easy to hear. But they're important. They're real. And the victims deserve to be remembered. So please take a moment and like this video. Comment below with thoughts. And for those who want to help continue this work, consider supporting the channel. Now let's go back in time, way back, to a series of murders that haunted Virginia for decades. Chapter 4, The Ghosts of Colonial Parkway, Southeastern Virginia, 1986 to 1989, solved January 2026. Some ghosts wait decades to reveal their names. The Colonial Parkway murders. For true crime enthusiasts, this name carries weight. The horror of it. 4 couples, 8 young people, murdered along a scenic Virginia parkway between 1986 and 1989. For 37 years, these murders were unsolved. Cold, frozen like the victims themselves, preserved in the amber of mystery and speculation and conspiracy theories. Until January 20th, 2026, when the FBI announced that DNA evidence had finally linked 2 of the victims to a killer. Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., born 1954, died 2017. He never faced justice, never saw the inside of a courtroom, never had to look the families in the eye and explain why. But at least now there's a name. Kathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski, found in October 1986, strangled and stabbed in their car. 2 young women whose lives were just beginning, who had dreams and plans and people who loved them. The DNA matches Wilmer, not just for them, but connected to other Colonial Parkway victims across those 3 terrible years. Here's what haunts this case. Wilmer died in 2017. Almost a decade ago. He lived his whole life after 1989 as a free man. Ate meals, watched TV, maybe had a family, maybe had friends who thought he was a good guy, a normal guy, just another person in the neighborhood. And the whole time he was carrying those murders inside him, like dark secrets, like buried bones. How many times did he drive past the Colonial Parkway? How many times did he see news coverage of the anniversary, the renewed pleas for information, the families begging for closure? Did he feel anything? Guilt, fear, pride, or nothing at all? Forensic science has provided an answer after 37 years. DNA doesn't lie. DNA doesn't forget. But it also doesn't explain why. It doesn't tell us what makes a man into a monster. It doesn't give back the lives he took or heal the wounds he left behind. All it does is give a name to attach to the horror. Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. A name to remember. One more story. The darkest one. And it's important to stay for this, because it's not about a single killer or a single crime. It's about hundreds of people, and the sea that swallowed them whole. Chapter 5. The Mediterranean's Cold Embrace, Central Mediterranean Sea, January 23rd to 27th, 2026. Imagine being desperate enough to put children on a boat, not a cruise ship, not a ferry with life preservers and safety regulations and trained crew. A smuggler's boat, overloaded, barely seaworthy, held together with hope and duct tape and the lies of men who take money and don't care if their passengers live or die. Fleeing something worse than drowning. War, maybe. Starvation. Violence. The kind of desperation that makes a lethal ocean crossing look like a reasonable option. And then the weather turns. The United Nations International Organization for Migration warned that several migrant vessels likely sank in the central Mediterranean during late January 2026. Severe weather, massive waves, boats that were never meant to handle conditions like that. The confirmed death toll, at least 3, but the real number, the number that keeps humanitarian workers awake at night, that echoes in the minds of everyone who understands what's happening out there, could be over 100, maybe more, maybe much more. Hundreds missing. Unverified vessels leaving Tunisia and Libya, heading for Italy, for Europe, for a chance at something better. They never made it. Among the confirmed dead, twin infants, babies, they died of hypothermia near Lampedusa, Italy. Hypothermia. Their tiny bodies couldn't generate enough heat, couldn't fight off the cold, couldn't survive the thing that should never have happened to them in the first place. Imagine being their parent. Imagine watching children die and knowing there's no way to save them. Knowing that every choice made, every step of this desperate journey, led to this moment. And then imagine that the grief doesn't even make international headlines, because it happens so often that it's not news anymore. This isn't a murder in the traditional sense. There's no single killer, no one person to arrest, to prosecute, to lock away. But there are killers here. The smuggling networks that profit from desperation, the weather, indifferent and cold, the policies that force people into these impossible choices, the world that looks away because it's easier than looking at what we've become. And the sea, always the sea, taking and never giving back. These aren't just statistics. These aren't just numbers in a UN report. These were people, mothers and fathers, children who wanted to grow up, dreamers who thought they could survive long enough to build something better. The Mediterranean swallowed them whole, and most of the world will never even know their names. 5 stories. 5 pockets of darkness from a single month. A nurse who tried to help, shot dead on a Minneapolis street. A man who murdered 3 people across 2 states in 48 hours. A shooter in Australia who laughed while he killed. A cold case solved 37 years later, revealing a monster who died free. And hundreds of people lost at sea, their deaths reduced to estimates and warnings. January 2026 is over now. The calendar has moved on. February came and went. The present moment is here, with people safe in their homes, watching videos on phones or computers, removed from the horror by distance and time, and the comfortable illusion of safety. But here's what Stephen King understood better than anyone. The monsters are always closer than anyone thinks. They walk among us. They live in our neighborhoods. They make decisions in government offices and back alleys and stormy seas. And any month, any day, could be the day the darkness opens up and swallows someone. If this video meant something, if it made anyone think or feel or remember that these victims mattered, then please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these stories. And most importantly, remember Alex Pretti. Remember Sophie Quinn and her unborn child, Nerida Quinn and John Harris. Remember the victims of Flay Rollins, whose names are still unknown. Remember Kathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski, who waited 37 years for justice. Remember the hundreds lost in the Mediterranean, whose names will never be known. Remember them, because in the end, that's all anyone can do. Bear witness. Tell the truth. Light a candle in the darkness and hope it's enough. Thank you for watching. And try to sleep well tonight. If possible,